Captain Elton Bay stood in the briefing room of the UNMC Relentless, his nano-forged claymore magnetized to his back, while he studied the holographic display of the cooler mining facility. The massive sword was an intimidating weapon, but like everything else about Deathworld-1, that was part of the point. The psychological edge was just as important as the monomolecular one. "Quite the fortress they've built themselves," Rebecca Taylor commented, checking the alignment on her modernized compound crossbow. The weapon was a perfect example of humanity's approach to warfare, ancient concepts upgraded with cutting-edge technology. The arrows it fired could punch through battleship armor, and the variety of specialized ammunition she carried made it more versatile than any energy weapon. "More like a tomb," Saul Jacobs replied, running a cloth over his plasma-edged warhammer. His backup weapon, a heavily modified combat shotgun loaded with quantum shredder rounds, rested against his leg. "They just don't know it yet." The other members of Bay's 6-person squad were similarly armed with both melee and ranged weapons. Kate Mitchell carried a power sword along with a railgun pistol that could put holes in tanks. Zach Stark wielded an energy flail with a needle rifle that fired programmable smart rounds. Their medic, Quinton Ross, kept her powered spear and sonic pulsar within easy reach, while she did final checks on their medical supplies. "Ladies and gentlemen," Commander Danny Garrison's voice cut through their preparations. The intelligence officer stepped into the hologram's glow, her expression grim. "I know you've been briefed on the basics, but we have new intel." Bay nodded for her to continue, noting how she seemed more tense than usual. "The Cooler aren't just holding our scientists, they're torturing them for information about the new shield technology they were developing. We've confirmed at least 8 human captives, though only 6 are still transmitting vital signs through their emergency implants." Bay felt his squad's mood darken. They'd all seen what happened to human prisoners in Cooler hands. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty. "Your primary objective is asset recovery," Wallace continued, manipulating the hologram to show internal layouts. "Secondary objective is elimination of the facility's leadership, specifically General Croc." The image shifted to show a tall, insectoid alien with distinctive red markings on its carapace. "He's developed quite an obsession with Earth recently." "Oh," Bay raised an eyebrow. "This could be useful." "Indeed." Wallace's lips curved in a predatory smile. "It seems the good general has been collecting data about Earth's most dangerous creatures, environments, and phenomena. He's particularly fascinated by the fact that humans consider things like volcanic regions and predator-filled wilderness to be suitable vacation spots." Taylor glanced up from her crossbow. "Wait till he finds out about Australian petting zoos." "That's actually relevant," Wallace said, "because Croc has also heard rumors about a human combat unit that takes its name from what the galactic community calls our homeworld. A unit known for its brutality in close combat, for its use of primitive weapons enhanced by modern technology, and for leaving survivors to spread tales of its ferocity." Now everyone was grinning. They'd chosen the name Deathworld-1 very deliberately, knowing how it would play on alien fears about Earth and its inhabitants. The implication that they were just one of several such units was part of the psychological warfare. Let the enemy imagine whole armies of specialized human-killing machines, each trained to emulate a different aspect of Earth's deadly ecology. "The generals become quite superstitious about it," Wallace added. "His personal logs are full of speculation about what horrors a planet like Earth must have engineered into its defenders. We think this could give you a significant tactical advantage." "Psychological warfare is still warfare," Bay agreed, studying the facility's layout more carefully now. "Insertion points. You'll be using their own bore holes to bypass the external defenses. Orbital drops right into the mining shafts." Wallace highlighted several vertical tunnels. "Your armor can handle the descent, and they won't be expecting anyone to come in that way. Most species would consider it suicidal." "Most species didn't evolve on a death world," Mitchell said, testing her sword's power field. Bay took one final look at the hologram, committing key details to memory. "Time to deployment. 30 minutes. Wallace's expression softened slightly. "Bring our people home, Captain, and make sure Croc lives to tell stories about how you did it." "Oh, he'll tell stories all right," Bay promised, his hand resting on his claymore's hilt. "He'll tell everyone exactly why they should fear the warriors of Deathworld-1. Because everything they've heard about us," his smile was all teeth, "it's worse in person." As his squad made their final preparations, Bay reflected on how their reputation had grown. What had started as a calculated attempt to weaponize alien fears about Earth had taken on a life of its own. The stories of their exploits, some true, some exaggerated, some complete fabrications, had spread through alien communication channels like wildfire. They'd earned every bit of that fear, though. Each member of Deathworld-1 was a master of both ancient and modern combat techniques, equally deadly at range or in close quarters. Their weapons and armor represented the perfect fusion of humanity's brutal past and technological present, and most importantly, they understood something that their alien opponents never seemed to grasp. They weren't just warriors who happened to come from Earth. They were warriors because they came from Earth. Every environmental challenge that made aliens label their homeworld a death world had shaped humanity into something unique in the galaxy, predators who could outthink their prey. Deployment in 5. The ship's AI announced. Melee Marines to your drop pods. Bay led his squad to the launch bay, each of them checking their weapons one final time. As they strapped into their pods, he opened the squad channel. Remember, people, we're not just a combat unit. We're a nightmare they tell their children about. We're every dark story they've ever heard about Earth and its defenders. We're their worst fears come to life. Aura, 5 voices responded in perfect unison. Drop pods armed and ready, the AI reported. May Earth's strength go with you. Bay allowed himself one final predatory grin as the launch countdown began. Time to remind the galaxy why they called Earth a death world. The drop pod's internal lighting shifted to red as Bay and his team plummeted through Cooler 3's atmosphere. They'd entered through different boreholes, spread out just enough to create multiple points of contact while staying within support range. Entering the shaft now, Taylor reported, her voice steady despite their near-vertical descent. Sensors show mining equipment 200 meters down. Lots of metal. Perfect cover, Bay responded. The cooler would never expect anyone to attempt entry through these narrow, debris-filled holes. Most species would consider it suicidal. But then, most species hadn't grown up climbing, splunking, and generally treating dangerous environments as playgrounds. Their pods hit the braking thrusters at precisely the right moment, slowing just enough to avoid detection while preventing them from becoming smears on the tunnel floor. Bay's pod came to rest behind a massive drilling machine, its bulk hiding him from the facility's internal sensors. Sound off, he ordered over the squad channel as he popped his pod's hatch. Taylor, in position. Jacobs, ready. Ready. Mitchell, good to go. Stark, all clear. Ross, set. Bay drew his claymore, the power field humming to life with a sub-audible vibration he felt in his bones. Remember, people, they know what Earth is. They know what we are. Let's use that. They converged on their first objective, a maintenance junction that would give them access to the facility's main levels. The tunnels were dark, lit only by occasional strips of bioluminescent material that the cooler used for emergency lighting. It was barely enough to see by for most species. Multiple contacts, Stark whispered, his helmet sensors picking up movement ahead. Patrol, looks like 4 of them. Standard security loadout. Bay held up a closed fist, bringing the squad to a halt in the shadows. Taylor? She already had her crossbow up, a specialized round nocked and ready. The weapon might seem primitive to most of the galaxy, but that was part of its effectiveness. No one expected the high-tech arrows that could punch through battle armor or release targeted EMP bursts. The cooler patrol rounded the corner, their chitinous armor reflecting the dim light. The lead guard was saying something about checking the mining sensors when Taylor's arrow took him through his primary breathing slit. The second guard fell before the first had hit the ground, another arrow finding a gap in his armor. The third guard managed to raise his weapon, but Jacob's shotgun roared in the confined space, the quantum shredder round literally erasing a sphere of matter from the alien's torso. The fourth guard turned to run, but stopped dead when Bay's voice cut through the darkness. Deathworld-1, on site. The effect was immediate. The cooler's antenna went rigid with terror, his outer shell paling to an almost translucent state. No, he chittered in badly accented standard, not you, not here. Tell your people, Bay said calmly, letting his claymore's power field cast an ominous glow in the darkness. Tell them who's coming. The guard bolted, his panicked communication clearly audible over their stolen frequency central. Central. The Deathworlders are here. The ones from Earth. Deathworld-1 is in the tunnels. Think that got their attention? Mitchell asked, her power sword humming as they moved past the fallen guards. That's the idea, Bay replied. Fear's a weapon like any other, sometimes better. They encountered 2 more patrols on their way to the detention level. The second they identified themselves, half the cooler troops broke and ran. The ones that stayed to fight died quickly, adding to the growing legend. Bay made sure his squad left clear evidence of their passing, clean cuts through armor that should have been impenetrable, bodies that told stories of impossible human strength and speed. The real challenge came when they reached the security station guarding the detention block. A dozen elite cooler warriors were waiting, led by a veteran sergeant whose shell bore the marks of many battles. So the sergeant's translator crackled. The famous Deathworld-1, we've heard stories about you. All true, Bay replied, his claymore's power field casting sharp shadows. Want to find out personally? The sergeant's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. You think we fear you because you come from a harsh world? Because you carry primitive weapons? The cooler empire spans 1,000 systems. We've seen everything. Have you? Ross asked, his voice carrying the same clinical detachment he used when treating wounds. Ever seen what happens when a human decides to stop playing nice? When we really embrace what our world taught us? As if on cue, Taylor loosed an arrow into the ceiling. It detonated in a shower of sparks, plunging the corridor into darkness. The cooler guards shifted nervously. Like most species, they relied heavily on their visual sensors. Fun fact about Earth, Bay said conversationally as his squad moved to surround the guards. Humans didn't evolve as pure visual hunters. We've got other senses, other instincts, the kind you develop on a world where everything's trying to kill you. The power fields of their melee weapons cast just enough light to create looming shadows, making the squad seem to shift and multiply in the darkness. It was an old trick, but effective against species that had evolved in more stable, predictable environments. Last chance, Bay offered. Surrender or find out exactly why the galaxy calls Earth a death world. The sergeant raised his weapon. We are cooler warriors. We do not, sir. The rest of his sentence was lost as Deathworld-1 attacked from all sides. Bay's claymore sheared through 2 guards with a single swing, while Mitchell's power sword found gaps in armor that shouldn't have existed. Stark's energy flail created a web of deadly light, herding the guards into Taylor's firing lines. Jacobs and Ross moved like dancers, their weapons extending the squad's reach even further. It was over in seconds. Only the sergeant still lived, pinned to the wall by one of Taylor's arrows, his shell cracked and leaking. How, he wheezed. How did you? We told you, Bay said quietly. Everything you've heard about us? It's worse in person. He gestured to Ross. Patch him up. Make sure he lives to tell stories about this. As Ross worked, Bay accessed the detention block's controls. The layout matched their intel perfectly. 8 cells, 6 still occupied according to the life sign monitors. They'd gotten here in time. Broadcast on all frequencies, he ordered. Let everyone in this facility know we're coming. Let them think about what that means. Because fear was a weapon, and right now, the stories spreading through the cooler communication channels were doing half their work for them. After all, what could be more terrifying than warriors from a world that should have killed them, warriors who instead had learned to kill everything else? The rescued scientists were in rough shape, but mobile. Ross had done what he could for their injuries, administering combat stims to keep them on their feet until extraction. Bay's blood had run cold when he saw the torture implements in the cells, primitive by human standards but effective. Command center's 3 levels up, Mitchell reported, checking facility schematics they'd pulled from the security station. Heavy resistance between us and there. Good, Jacobs said, cycling fresh rounds into his shotgun. The weapons fabricator was working overtime to replace the exotic ammunition he'd expended. Wouldn't want them to think we're getting soft. The facility's internal comms were chaos. Every channel they monitored was filled with panic reports about the Deathworlders cutting through their defenses. Some claimed Deathworld-1 was actually a squad of genetically engineered super soldiers. Others insisted they were demons who'd crawled up from Earth's core. One particularly hysterical guard swore they could turn invisible and walk through walls. Sir, Taylor called out, her crossbow trained on the corridor ahead. You need to hear this. She patched a transmission through their squad channel. General Croc's voice filled their helmets, the translation software struggling to keep up with his agitated clicking. Don't care what it takes. Seal all approaches to the command level. Deploy the heavy weapons. They're just humans, no matter what world spawned them. They can die like any other, a subordinate interrupted with something their translators couldn't catch. What do you mean they're using projectile weapons? The barriers are calibrated for no, that's impossible. How did they breach 3 checkpoints with primitive steel weapons? What do you mean they left survivors? He's starting to sound worried, Stark observed, his energy flail humming eagerly. Bay nodded. Time to give him something real to worry about. Taylor, Mitchell, take the scientists to the secondary extraction point. The rest of you with me. We're going to pay the general a visit. The 2 teams split up, with Taylor and Mitchell escorting their rescued personnel toward a maintenance shaft that would give them access to the surface. The remaining 4 members of Deathworld-1 headed upward, toward the command center where Croc waited. They encountered the first real resistance at a barricaded checkpoint. 24 elite cooler guards had set up interlocking fields of fire backed by automated defense turrets. It should have been an impregnable position. Remember what they call us, Bay said over the squad channel. Remember why. They attacked without warning. Jacob's quantum shredder rounds created temporary holes in reality that the cooler barriers couldn't possibly stop. Stark's energy flail wrapped around a turret and literally pulled it apart. Ross moved with surgical precision, his powered spear finding weak points in armor and defensive screens alike. And Bay showed them exactly why he led Deathworld-1. His claymore moved like it was alive, the power field destabilizing energy barriers, while the mono-molecular edge did the rest. He carved through their defenses like they were made of paper, each strike calculated to create maximum psychological impact. When it was over, he made sure to leave a few guards alive, wounded but able to report what they'd seen. The stories would spread. They fought their way up through 2 more levels, their reputation growing with each encounter. Some cooler troops fled at the mere sight of them. Others fought with desperate courage, but courage alone wasn't enough against warriors who treated lethal environments as training grounds. Finally, they reached the command level. The massive armored doors were sealed, but that hardly mattered. Ross' analysis of the facility systems had already given them everything they needed. Breaching charges set, Jacobs reported, placing the last device. Ready on your mark. Bay opened a channel to the command center. General Croc, I believe you've been studying our world, learning about Earth's predators, its killers. He paused for effect. Did you learn enough to survive meeting them? Croc's response was immediate. You are the ones they call Deathworld-1, the warriors from the planet of death. That's right, and we've come to discuss your hospitality toward our scientists. You don't understand, Croc's clicking took on a frantic edge. We needed the shield technology. The Empire demanded results. I had no choice. There's always a choice, Bay replied coldly. You chose to torture our people. Now we're choosing how to respond. He signaled Jacobs, breach. The charges detonated in perfect sequence, creating a cascade failure in the door's molecular structure. As it disintegrated, they caught their first glimpse of the command center and of the general's obsession. Every screen showed footage from Earth. Volcanic eruptions, apex predators hunting, natural disasters in all their fury. Croc stood among the displays, his carapace pale with terror, surrounded by his remaining guards. Stay back. The general shrieked. I've studied your world. I know what it creates, what it takes to survive there. No, Bay said quietly, stepping through the breach. You really don't. The fight was brief but spectacular. The guards tried to form a defensive line, but against warriors who treated death worlds as playgrounds, they might as well have been standing still. Jacobs and Stark took the flanks while Ross provided covering fire. Bay went straight for Croc. The general had obviously received combat training. His energy blade hummed dangerously as he settled into a fighting stance. But he trained to fight normal opponents, not someone who'd grown up on a world that constantly tried to kill its inhabitants. Bay's claymore knocked Croc's weapon aside with contemptuous ease. His next strike cracked the general's carapace, sending him stumbling backward into his precious displays. The screen showed Earth's monsters, its natural weapons, its deadly beauty. Fascinating collection, Bay noted, standing over the fallen general. But you missed the most important part about Earth. What? Croc wheezed, clutching his wounded shell. What did I miss? Everything you see there. The predators, the disasters, the deadly environments. Bay's smile was hidden behind his helmet, but it carried in his voice. To us, that's just home, and we learned from all of it. He raised his claymore, then paused, considering. You wanted to know about Earth's killers? About what our world created? Look around you. We're not just named after a death world, we're what happens when that world teaches its children how to fight back. The general lived as planned, but he would carry the scars of this encounter for the rest of his life. More importantly, he would tell stories. Stories about warriors from a world that should have killed them, who instead learned to kill everything else. Stories about Deathworld-1. The extraction ships descended through Cooler 3's atmosphere like vengeful angels, their hulls still glowing from re-entry. Bay watched them approach from his position on the facility's upper landing pad, where Taylor and Mitchell had successfully delivered the rescued scientists. Package secure, Taylor reported, her crossbow trained on the group of subdued Cooler officers they'd brought with them, carefully selected survivors who would spread the right kind of stories. Medical transport is 2 minutes out. Bay nodded, turning his attention to the data crystal in his hand. They'd pulled it from Croc's personal terminal, and its contents were interesting. Not just information about Earth's deadliest creatures and environments, but psychological assessments of human adaptability. Reports on how humans treated lethal conditions as challenges rather than apocalyptic events. "Sir," Ross called over the squad channel, "you might want to hear this." He patched through an intercepted transmission between one of their captives and a Cooler command post several systems away. The guard was describing their attack in detail, but what caught Bay's attention was how the story had already evolved. They moved like shadows through solid walls. Their primitive weapons ignored our barriers as if they didn't exist. And their leader? The guard's clicking grew more frantic. He knew things about our world that no outsider should know. Said Earth had taught them the secrets of death itself. Jacobs chuckled. "Guess we made an impression." "That was the point," Bay replied, watching as the first medical transport touched down. "Fear's contagious. Every story they tell will spread it further." The rescued scientists were quickly transferred to the medical ship where proper care awaited. One of them, a woman who'd endured 3 weeks of Cooler interrogation, caught Bay's arm as she was helped aboard. "They kept asking us about Earth," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "About how we survived there. About what kind of world could produce beings like us." She managed a weak smile. "Then you showed them." As the medical transport lifted off, Stark approached with their final surprise for the facility. "Charges are set. Ready on your command." They weren't going to destroy the whole facility. That would be wasteful. Instead, they'd rigged key sections to collapse in specific ways. The resulting ruins would tell their own story, of impossible feats of strength, of weapons that shouldn't exist, of warriors who turned an enemy's fortress into a monument to their power. "One last thing," Bay said, turning to Croc. The general's cracked carapace had been patched enough to keep him alive, but the wounds would scar. Another story written in flesh and shell. You wanted to understand Earth. Here's a lesson. On our world, apex predators don't just kill. They teach other predators to stay away. He triggered the first sequence of charges. Deep below, carefully placed explosives began to reshape the facility's infrastructure. Not destroying it, but transforming it into something that would inspire terror in anyone who saw it. "Spread the word, General," Bay continued as his squad prepared for extraction. "Tell everyone what you learned about Earth's children. About what we became." He gestured to the data crystal. "Tell them about the world that forged us. The world that taught us how to survive anything, and how to make sure our enemies don't." The charges continued their work as Deathworld-1 boarded their extraction vessel. The facility's new architecture would raise questions that the survivors would eagerly answer. How did humans reshape solid metal with apparent ease? How did they move through sealed barriers? How did they seem to know exactly where to strike? The answers wouldn't matter. The stories would grow with each telling, becoming more terrifying, more impossible. Deathworld-1 would become more than just a military unit. They would become a legend, a nightmare that even the proudest warrior species would learn to fear. As their ship broke atmosphere, Bay looked back at the twisted monument they'd created. The mission was a success, but it was more than that. They'd proven once again why Earth's reputation as a death world was both a warning and a promise. "Command, this is Deathworld-1, he transmitted. "Mission accomplished. Package secure. Message delivered." "Good work," Garrison's voice crackled back. "The brass is already getting reports of Cooler forces withdrawing from 3 other sectors. Seems they've suddenly developed an intense respect for Earthborn warriors." "Just doing what our world taught us," Bay replied, sharing a knowing look with his squad. After all, Earth's greatest lesson wasn't just about surviving. It was about making sure everyone else knew exactly why they called it a death world. And Deathworld-1. They were just getting started. Because somewhere out in the galaxy, other species were starting to ask questions about Earth, about its children, about the warriors who took their death world's name as a badge of honor. They would learn. They would all learn. One mission at a time. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave it a like and to subscribe if you'd like to see more. Feel free to comment and share it as well. With all that said, go on and check out the video in the top left. I think you might like it.